Hello everyone, welcome back to our little series where me and my good friend Sprotke, as usual, are guiding you through the rules of MTG. In this penultimate episode of Series 1, we will be showing you how an actual game turn looks like. We will go step by step to demonstrate the phases and what you can and must do in them in order to play the game. Thank you very much, Sprotke. As you can see, I set up a little scenario here where I can show you every single little detail of what can happen in a turn. During a turn of play, you have 5 phases divided by different steps. These 5 phases are, as you can see on the screen here, are the beginning phase, the main phase, the combat phase, another main phase, and the end phase. These phases are divided by steps, and by following these steps, you're gonna finish your turn. As we discussed before, the aim of the game is to defeat the other guy, and you can do this by reducing their life total to 0. The beginning phase. The start of the beginning phase, every card which has been tapped before untaps automatically. You can do this here with these lands. Then, after that, there's a step called upkeep. In the upkeep, all sorts of various things can happen, which is always indicated on the cards you have in play. In our example here, I have an ability of the One Ring, which says, the beginning of your upkeep, you lose 1 life for each burden counter on the One Ring. Currently, the burden counter is 1, therefore, I'm gonna take 1 point of damage in my upkeep. After that, there is a draw step, where the player whose turn it is draws a card. Let's do that. Put it into our hand. So now we have 4 cards in our hand. This was your beginning phase. After that comes your first main phase. In your main phase, you can play lands from your hand, 1 land per turn. So let's do that. We play our 4th mountain here, and you can cast any spell from your hand or activate any ability you have. The cards have 1 creature and 2 instant spells in them. The only thing worth casting in your main phase generally is a creature. Let's do that. We tapped 1 black mana we have, and we tap 2 red mana we have. We play this Rook Hypercircle. It has an enters the battlefield ability. When it enters, something happens. We will skip through this for now, just to make it easier for the demonstration. After that, we can use any sort of abilities we have. So let's do that. Let's do this One Ring ability, which says, tap, put a burden counter on the One Ring, then draw a card for each burden counter on the One Ring. So, tapping it, put a counter on it, and we draw 1 card for each counter on it, which is 2. 1 and 2. Here we go. We finish with our main phase, so we go to the next step, which is called a combat. Combat is where creatures can attack your opponent if it's your turn. If it's not your turn, your creatures can only defend you from incoming attackers. Step 1 of this combat step is declaring attackers. So we have 2 creatures in play. One of them has summoning sickness. Remember the creatures video, we talked about this. We can only declare 1 attacker. In order to declare an attacker, we have to tap that creature. So we're going to do that. We're going to attack the opponent. It's important to know that unlike some other card games, you can only attack your opponent, and they can decide whether they're going to try to stop you with their own creatures or not. Example 1 is what happens when they don't have any creatures to stop you, which means that they're going to take damage equal to the creature's power, which in this case is 2. Now, for a further example, what happens if they actually have creatures? For example, they Stalwart of Osgiliath. So after we declare attackers, say Battle-Scarred Goblin attacks, the next step is the declare blocker step, where your opponent you attack can declare something called blocks. Blocking is when you send one of your creatures to stop the opposing attacking creatures. There's 3 important things to know about blocking. Only creatures which are untapped can block, which they have. 1 creature can only block 1 creature, but multiple creatures can block the same creature. In this example, our opponent has only 1 creature, and he decides to block our creature with, so he moves it and indicates that this creature is blocking. Once a creature gets blocked, they don't deal damage to the opponent. They're gonna deal damage to the opposing creature's toughness. So in our example here, normally, the Battle-Scarred Goblin would deal 2 damage to the opposing 3 toughness, and the blocking creature will deal 4 damage to the opposing 2 toughness. In our case, we have 3 different options. We only have 2 mana left. We can only use 1 of them, so we have to choose carefully. Our options are as follows. We can smite the deathless dead creature to kill it and remove it from the combat. We can Gameless Fury our own creature to make it bigger, or we can use an improvised club to sacrifice said creature to deal damage to any target. Once you move to the damage step, creature is gonna deal damage instantly. Therefore, there is no other option to use your instant effects but before that step. So you always have to announce it with the phrase of something similar to that before damage. In our case here, in this example, luckily Battle-Scarred Goblin has an ability So whenever it becomes blocked, it deals 1 damage to each creature blocking it. But the point of blocking, this creature is gonna take 1 point of damage, if it's declared blocker anyway. These two creatures will happily and merrily kill each other. Let's go to that. So, this guy has already 1 point of damage on him, which reduces his toughness to 2. Our goblin deals 2 damage, this toughness goes to 0, it dies. Opposing creature deals 4 damage to our battle-scarred goblin, toughness go below 0, so they both die. They go to the graveyard. Off you go. Here we are, we finished our combat step, and now, after combat, we have a second main phase, which is exactly like the first one. We can cast any sorcery speed effects there if it's our turn, say additional creatures, or any other spells after a combat happened, but since we already played a land this turn, we cannot play an additional land even if we have one in our hand. So we have only the 2 mana left to do as we please. We can choose to cast this improvised club for 2 mana. It has an additional cost of sacrificing an artifact or a creature. Now, as remember, we have this Wandering Artifact, which the next upkeep step is gonna deal 2 damage to us, and we don't want that to happen. Therefore, it's beneficial to us to sacrifice that. So we announce the casting of the spell, we sacrifice the artifact, and we choose a target. Any target can be players or creatures, or any in-game objects with toughness or life points. So we're gonna deal 4 damage to the opponent. Because we don't have any more mana left to play, any spells, then we move to our end step. In the end step, there are 3 important things happening. Step number 1. Creatures being dealt damage but didn't die, like we discussed in the creatures video, will heal up to their printed toughness. So, say if this Uruk-hai Berserker would took 1 damage during their turn from a creature or for a spell, at the end of our turn, it will heal up to its printed toughness. Thing number 2, cards like Glimmer's Fury's effect, which says until end of turn, will finish to have its effect. So, if we would have cast this on our Uruk-hai Berserker, then during our turn, that would have been a 6 power 4 toughness creature. But when we go to the end step, this effect disappears, so it becomes a 3 power 2 toughness creature again. And lastly, we do have a maximum hand size of 7 cards in our hand, which means that if at the end of our turn we have more than 7 cards in our hand, we have to get rid of cards up until we have 7 left. In our current example, as you can see, we only have 3 cards left, so that's not relevant. But what happens when we have 8? It means that we have to choose a card to discard. In our current examples, I will choose this card and it goes to the graveyard. So now we have 7 cards left in our hand. This is a brief summary of how a turn looks like, and after that, I'm gonna pass the turn to my opponent, which he can play his own turn exactly the same way as is described. That's about it, sums us up for how a turn of play goes in Magic the Gathering. Thank you for staying with us in this brief series, and we have a special bonus episode for you next time, where we will play an actual demo game teaching one of our friends who never played Magic the Gathering before of how the actual game works in practice. Stay tuned for that too. As always, if you feel we left something important out or you have questions, don't forget to mention that in the comments. Like and subscribe for more similar things to come. After that video, we are planning to continue the series with more complicated and in-depth guides on the intricate elements of the game. Hope to see you there too. Bye!